The day my husband tried to have me committed to a psychiatric facility was the day I realized I was married to a stranger. I'm Elena Torres, and at 50 years old, I found myself sitting in a psychiatrist's office with trembling hands, asking a question I never thought I'd have to ask. Am I losing my mind? For 2 years, 730 days, the man I'd shared a bed with for 26 years had been systematically convincing everyone I knew that I was mentally unstable, my friends, my children, our family doctor, even me, especially me. He told them I was paranoid, delusional, that I was having a breakdown, and here's the terrifying part. I started to believe him. Before we continue, please take a moment to leave a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. And please hit the like button for me right now and subscribe to my channel. We're building a community of people who know it's never too late to heal and find the truth. Now, back to my story. But before I tell you about that moment in Dr. Rebecca Walsh's office, the moment that changed everything, you need to understand how a successful, intelligent woman with a thriving career and a beautiful family could end up doubting her own sanity. You need to understand how someone can steal your reality without ever raising a hand against you, because that's what Victor did. He didn't hit me. He didn't scream. He did something far more insidious. He made me disappear from my own life, piece by piece, memory by memory, until I wasn't sure what was real anymore. And it started so small I almost didn't notice. It was a Tuesday in March, 2 years before everything fell apart. I remember because Tuesdays were my admin days, the day I handled the business side of my interior design firm. I was successful, you understand. 20 years building Torres interiors from a side hustle into something real, something mine. I had clients throughout the suburbs, a small team, a reputation for transforming spaces into something that felt like home. I was good at what I did. I was someone. I want you to remember that, because Victor worked very hard to make everyone forget it. That Tuesday, I was reviewing our bank statements, something I did every week like clockwork, when I noticed a withdrawal, $10,000 from our joint savings account. Now, Victor and I had always been partners in our finances. 26 years of marriage, we discussed everything, big purchases, investments, even expensive dinners. It was our rule, our agreement. So I called him at his office. Victor ran a consulting firm downtown, all glass and steel, and impressive. He was respected, you know. Everyone thought he was such a good man. "Honey," I said when he answered, my tone light, casual. "I'm looking at the bank statements and I see a $10,000 withdrawal from savings. What was that for? Did we talk about this?" There was a pause. Not long, maybe 3 seconds, but in those 3 seconds something shifted. I didn't know it then, but that pause was Victor recalibrating, choosing his weapon. "Elena," he said, and his voice was so gentle, so patient, like he was talking to a child who'd forgotten their homework. "We talked about this last week, the investment property down payment for the duplex in Riverside. You said you thought it was a good idea." I felt my stomach tighten. "We talked about looking at investment properties, but I don't remember agreeing to." We had a whole conversation about it. His voice was still gentle, but there was something underneath it now, something that felt like concern. "You were sitting at the kitchen table. You had your reading glasses on. You said, and I quote, 'If the numbers work, let's do it.' I even asked you twice if you were sure." I sat there staring at the bank statement, trying to pull up the memory. Had we talked about this? I remembered discussions about investment properties in general, but a specific conversation about a duplex in Riverside? About $10,000? The memory wasn't there, but the doubt was creeping in like fog. "I don't remember that conversation," I said quietly. "Elena." Now his voice held worry, real worry, or what sounded like real worry. "Sweetheart, you've been stressed. You've been taking on too many clients. Maybe you're just tired?" "I'm not that tired, Victor. I think I'd remember discussing a $10,000 investment." "Then maybe you should talk to someone." He said it so carefully, so lovingly. "I've been noticing little things. You've been forgetting conversations, Last week, you couldn't remember if you'd locked the front door. You asked me the same question about Evan's new job 3 times in one evening. I'm worried about you. And just like that, the conversation had shifted. We weren't talking about the money anymore. We were talking about my memory, my stress, my problems. I got off the phone feeling unsettled, confused. And I did something I'd never done before. I opened a new document on my computer and typed, March 17th. Victor withdrew $10,000. He says we discussed it. I don't remember. I saved it in a folder I labeled Garden Plans, where he'd never look. That was the first entry in what would become my survival journal, my evidence that I wasn't crazy. But I didn't know I'd need evidence then. I just thought I was tired. The thing about gaslighting, and I didn't know the word for it then, didn't understand what was happening, is that it doesn't work all at once. It's not one big lie. It's 1,000 small ones, each so insignificant that you feel foolish for even questioning it. It's death by 1,000 cuts, except the cuts are to your reality, your confidence, your sense of self. 2 weeks after the bank account incident, I couldn't find my car keys. I'd put them on the hook by the garage door like I always did, 20 years of the same habit. But they weren't there. I searched everywhere. The kitchen counters, my purse, the pockets of yesterday's jacket. Nothing. I was supposed to meet a client in 40 minutes, and I was starting to panic when Victor walked in from his morning run. What's wrong? He asked, barely winded, still in his running gear. My keys. They're gone. I put them on the hook last night. I know I did, but they're not there. He walked to the garage door, reached up to the hook, the empty hook I'd checked 4 times, and pulled down my keys. They were just sitting there, in plain sight, right where they were supposed to be. You mean these? He held them up, and his face was a perfect mask of gentle concern. I stared at them. I had checked that hook. I had looked right at it, multiple times. They weren't there. I checked. Honey, they were right here on the hook. He walked over and pressed the keys into my hand, then put his palm against my forehead like he was checking for a fever. Are you feeling okay? You look pale. I looked at that hook, Victor, 4 times. Elena, I'm worried about you. He said it so softly, with so much love in his eyes that I felt tears prick my own. This is the 3rd time this week you've lost something and then found it right where it was supposed to be. Last night you were looking for your phone while you were talking on it. Maybe you should see someone, a doctor, just to make sure everything's okay. I drove to my client meeting in a daze, and I did something that felt ridiculous even as I was doing it. I pulled out my phone and recorded a voice memo. Tuesday, March 31st, 9:15 a.m. I put my keys on the hook last night. I know I did. I checked that hook 4 times this morning and they weren't there. Victor found them on the hook. I don't understand what's happening. My client meeting was a disaster. I kept losing my train of thought, second-guessing my design recommendations. When Mrs. Chen asked me a question about color palettes, I had to ask her to repeat herself 3 times. I saw her exchange a look with her husband, that look that says, "Is she okay?" And I felt shame burn through me. Was something wrong with me? Was Victor right? That night, I logged onto our banking app to check something, and I couldn't get in. My password didn't work. I tried 3 times. Then 4, and the account locked. Victor was in his study, and I walked in trying to keep my voice steady. The bank app locked me out. My password isn't working. He looked up from his laptop, reading glasses perched on his nose. Oh, did you not get the email? The bank had that security breach last month, remember? I reset all our passwords. I told you the new one. You didn't tell me the new one. Elena, yes, I did. We were in the kitchen. You were making coffee. I wrote it down on the notepad by the phone. He stood up, walked to his desk drawer, and pulled out a small piece of paper with a password written on it in his handwriting. See? This is what I wrote down for you. I specifically told you I was changing it. I took the paper, staring at the unfamiliar string of letters and numbers. I wanted to scream that he'd never told me, that I would have remembered something that important. But doubt was eating away at my certainty. I'd been forgetting things, The keys, the phone conversation. My client meeting today had been a disaster. Maybe he had told me. Maybe I'd forgotten. "Thank you," I whispered, and I saw something flicker across his face. Just for a second. It might have been satisfaction, but then it was gone, replaced by that expression of loving concern that was becoming so familiar. "Maybe you should make an appointment with Dr. Harrison," he said gently. "Just a checkup. I'm sure it's nothing, probably just stress. But let's be safe, okay?" I made the appointment. I actually called our family doctor and made an appointment to discuss my memory issues. That's how far into his reality I'd already fallen. But things got worse. God, they got so much worse. It started with my friends. I'd known Lisa and Margaret for 15 years. We met at a book club and stayed close even after the club dissolved. We had lunch every other Thursday without fail. It was sacred time, our time. But suddenly, they stopped responding to my texts. When I finally caught Lisa on the phone, she was weird, distant. "Is everything okay?" I asked. "You guys have been so quiet lately." "Oh, Elena, She paused. "Victor mentioned you've been going through a hard time. We didn't want to overwhelm you. He said you needed some space." The floor seemed to tilt under me. "Victor said what?" "He said you've been stressed, having some health issues. We just wanted to give you room to deal with everything. But if you're feeling better, we'd love to get together soon." "What health issues?" "Lisa, what exactly did Victor tell you?" Another pause, longer this time. "Maybe you should talk to Victor about this. I don't want to speak out of turn." She got off the phone quickly after that, and I sat there trying to understand. Victor had told my friends I was going through something. What had he said? What story was he telling about me when I wasn't there to defend myself? I checked my calendar. I was meticulous about my calendar, another 20-year habit, and I realized something. I'd had lunch plans scheduled with different friends 4 times in the last 2 months, but every single one had been canceled, and now that I thought about it, Victor had been the one to tell me about the cancellations. Lisa called, said something came up. Margaret texted. "She's not feeling well. Rachel has a work emergency." I opened my phone and went through my messages. There were no cancellation texts, no calls, nothing. Just my messages to them and their responses getting shorter and less frequent, and then stopping altogether. He was isolating me. The thought came sudden and cold. He was cutting me off from my friends. But why would he do that? This was Victor, my husband, the man who'd held my hand when my mother died, who'd supported my business from day one, who'd been there for every moment of our children's lives. Why would the man I'd built a life with want to isolate me from the people I loved? Unless I was paranoid. Unless this was exactly what he'd told my friends, that I was having some kind of breakdown, seeing threats where there were none, losing touch with reality. Maybe I was connecting dots that didn't exist. Maybe this was all in my head. I made another entry in my secret journal, but I could barely type through my shaking hands. The worst part, though, the part that nearly broke me, was when he weaponized our children. Evan was 28, working in finance in the city. Sophia was 25, teaching elementary school, and engaged to a lovely man named James. They were my pride and joy, my proof that I'd done something right in this world. We'd always been close. I talked to one or both of them almost every day. But over the course of a few weeks, I noticed them pulling away. Responses to my texts took longer. Calls were shorter. When we did talk, they were careful with me, like I was fragile, like I might break. It came to a head at a family dinner. Victor had insisted on having everyone over. Evan, Sophia, James, for Sunday dinner like we used to do. I made lasagna, Victor's favorite, and set the table with the good dishes. I wanted everything to be perfect. I wanted to feel normal again, like our family was still solid, still real. Dinner was strained. Conversation felt forced. I kept catching Evan and Sophia exchanging glances, the kind of silent communication that siblings develop over decades. Finally, I was telling a story about a difficult client, and I mentioned something Victor had said to me about the situation. Your father said I should just drop the client if she was going to be that demanding, but I never said that. Victor's voice was quiet, but everyone heard it. The table went silent. I looked at him. Yes, you did. Thursday night. We were in bed, and I was telling you about Mrs. Patterson's third design revision request, and you said, Elena, I said you should set clearer boundaries, not drop the client. There's a difference. No, you specifically said I should drop her. You said, sweetheart. He reached across the table and put his hand over mine, his face full of love and worry. You've been so stressed lately. Maybe you're remembering it differently than how it happened. I pulled my hand back. Victor, I know what you said. And that's when I saw it. Evan and Sophia looking at each other with that expression. That here we go again expression. That Dad was right expression. The room felt like it was closing in on me. Mom, Sophia said carefully, like she was approaching a spooked horse. Dad mentioned you've been having trouble with your memory lately. Have you seen a doctor yet? The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. You've been talking about me? Behind my back? We're worried about you, Evan said. Dad says you've been forgetting conversations, losing things. That's not like you. We just want to make sure you're okay. I am okay. But was I? Looking around the table at my family, all of them looking at me with concern and pity, I felt my certainty crumbling. What if they were right? What if there was something wrong with me? I think you should see someone, Mom. Sophia's voice was gentle. Just talk to someone. A therapist, maybe. There's no shame in it. Victor was nodding, his hand back on mine, squeezing supportively. I've been saying the same thing. I even found a good psychiatrist, Dr. Walsh. She specializes in women's health issues. I could make you an appointment. And there it was. He'd already found a psychiatrist, already laid the groundwork. I was being managed, handled, carefully moved into position like a chess piece. I excused myself from the table, locked myself in the bathroom, and cried until I couldn't breathe. When I looked at myself in the mirror, I saw a stranger, a woman who'd lost 20 pounds in the last few months without noticing. A woman with dark circles under her eyes and fine lines that seemed to have appeared overnight. A woman who looked exactly like someone having a breakdown. What if I really was crazy? The final straw came 3 weeks later. I was in the kitchen making coffee, my one sacred morning ritual, when Victor came downstairs already dressed for work. He looked serious, worried, the kind of worried that makes your stomach drop. Elena, we need to talk. I gripped my coffee mug. About what? I got a call from Sophia yesterday. She's really concerned about you. So is Evan. They're concerned because you keep telling them there's something wrong with me. Because there is something wrong. His voice was sharp now, impatient. Then he caught himself and softened. Sweetheart, you're not yourself. You haven't been for months. You're forgetting things constantly. You've lost so much weight. Your friends don't hear from you anymore. Your business is suffering. Don't think I haven't noticed you working late every night trying to catch up. This isn't sustainable. My business is fine, Victor. Is it? Because Evan said you missed a client meeting last week entirely. Didn't show up, didn't call. That's not you, Elena. That's not the woman I married. I hadn't missed a client meeting, had I? I pulled out my phone, checked my calendar. The meeting wasn't there, but I could have sworn. No, I would have put it in my calendar. I always put meetings in my calendar, unless I'd forgotten. Unless. I think we need to consider more intensive help, Victor said quietly. Dr. Walsh can do an evaluation. If she thinks you need more support, there are facilities. Facilities? The word came out as a whisper. You want to put me in a facility? I want you to get better. He ran his hands through his hair, the picture of a frustrated, caring husband at his wit's end. Sophia thinks it might be necessary. She's been reading about early onset dementia, and some of your symptoms. I don't have dementia. But even as I said it, doubt flooded through me. How would I know? If your mind is going, you can't trust your own mind to tell you the truth. Then prove it. See Dr. Walsh. Let her evaluate you. If she says you're fine, we'll drop it. But if she thinks you need help, you have to promise me you'll accept it. Please, Elena. I can't watch you deteriorate like this. I love you too much." And he started crying. Right there in our kitchen, tears rolling down his face, looking every bit like a devoted husband watching his wife slip away. I found myself comforting him, promising I'd see Dr. Walsh, promising I'd accept help if I needed it. That's how good he was. That night, after Victor was asleep, I sat at my computer and pulled up my secret journal. 2 years of entries, 2 years of doubting myself, of trying to hold on to my reality while it was systematically dismantled. I read through them all, and for the first time I saw the pattern, the escalation, the way Victor had isolated me from friends, undermined me with my children, taken control of our finances, made me doubt every single thing I knew to be true. And I realized something terrifying. He was building a case. He was creating a narrative where I was so mentally unstable that I needed to be institutionalized. And once I was in a facility, he'd have complete control, the finances, the assets, everything I'd built, everything I was. I was 50 years old, and my husband was trying to erase me. My hands were shaking as I typed Dr. Rebecca Walsh into Google. Not the psychiatrist Victor had chosen for me, but my own search. I found articles she'd written, papers on psychological abuse, coercive control, gaslighting. I found her practice website, with her kind, intelligent face smiling out at me, and her specialization listed women's mental health, trauma recovery, and victims of domestic psychological abuse. At 3 a.m, I sent her an email. I poured everything out, every incident, every doubt, every moment of confusion. I hit send before I could talk myself out of it, before that voice in my head that sounded increasingly like Victor could convince me I was overreacting, being paranoid, proving his point. She responded the next morning. "Mrs. Torres, what you're describing sounds very serious. I have an opening this Thursday at 2 p.m. Please come in. And please, if possible, don't tell your husband about this appointment until after we've talked." That last line. Don't tell your husband. She already knew. Just from my email, she already knew. Thursday came. I told Victor I had a client meeting. He kissed me goodbye, told me to drive safe, to call if I felt confused or disoriented, playing the concerned husband to the very end. Dr. Walsh's office was in a modern building downtown, all glass and light. Nothing like the dark, intimidating psychiatric facilities I'd been imagining. Her waiting room had comfortable chairs, soft music, a diffuser with lavender oil. Normal, professional, safe. When she called my name, I stood on shaking legs. This was it, the moment of truth. Either I was going to find out I really was losing my mind, or I was going to find out something so much worse. Dr. Rebecca Walsh was in her mid-40s with warm brown eyes and a calm presence that made me want to cry with relief. She gestured to a comfortable chair across from her desk. "Mrs. Torres, thank you for coming. I want you to know that this is a completely confidential session. Nothing you say here will be shared with anyone without your explicit written permission. You're safe here. Now, I read your email, but I'd like you to tell me, in your own words, what's been happening. Start wherever feels right, and take all the time you need." So I talked. For 45 minutes, I talked. I told her everything, every incident, every moment of doubt, every time Victor had made me question my reality. I showed her my secret journal on my phone. I told her about the bank account, the car keys, my friends disappearing, my children looking at me like I was broken. I told her about Victor researching involuntary commitment, about him finding a psychiatrist for me, about him building this narrative of a mentally unstable wife who needed to be saved from herself. Dr. Walsh listened without interrupting. She took notes. She nodded occasionally. Her face remained professionally neutral, but I could see something in her eyes. Recognition, maybe. Or anger. When I finally finished, drained and exhausted, she put down her pen and looked directly at me. "Mrs. Torres," she said, her voice clear and firm, "I need you to hear this. You are not crazy. You are not having a breakdown. You do not have dementia or any cognitive disorder. What you have experienced over the past 2 years is a textbook case of psychological abuse through gaslighting and coercive control. Your husband has been systematically undermining your reality, isolating you from support systems, and positioning himself to take control of your life and assets. This is abuse. It is calculated. It is intentional, and it is not your fault. The room seemed to spin, not from confusion this time, but from the weight of validation, from the relief of finally being believed. I'm not crazy. My voice broke. You're not crazy. You're being gaslighted. And Mrs. Torres, I need you to understand something else. Based on what you've told me, your husband was very likely planning to have you involuntarily committed. In this state, a spouse can initiate that process with supporting testimony from family and a psychiatric evaluation. He was building that case. You getting here first, to me, may have just saved your life as you know it. I started crying then, deep, wrenching sobs that shook my whole body. 2 years of doubt and fear and confusion poured out of me. Dr. Walsh handed me tissues and let me cry, and when I finally caught my breath, she leaned forward. Now, she said, we have work to do. Because the man who's been doing this to you isn't going to stop just because you know the truth. We need to document everything. We need to build your case, and we need to get you out of there safely. Are you ready to fight back? I thought about Victor, home right now, probably checking his watch, wondering when his confused, deteriorating wife would return from her client meeting. I thought about my children, believing his lies. I thought about my friends, shut out by his careful manipulations. I thought about my business, my independence, my sanity, everything he'd been trying to take from me. Yes, I said. I'm ready. So here's what I need you to think about. How many people in your life would believe you over your partner if it came down to your word against theirs? Because that's what makes this kind of abuse so terrifying. It doesn't leave bruises anyone can see. I walked out of Dr. Walsh's office that Thursday afternoon and did something I hadn't done in 2 years. I drove past my house without going inside. I couldn't face Victor yet, not with this new knowledge burning in my chest like swallowed fire. Not when every cell in my body was screaming that the man I'd shared a bed with for 26 years had been systematically trying to destroy my mind so he could take everything I'd built. So instead, I drove to a coffee shop 3 towns over where nobody knew me, where I could sit in a corner booth and try to process the fact that I wasn't crazy. I was being abused. The word felt strange in my mouth. Abuse. When you hear that word, you think of bruises, of screaming, of police reports and restraining orders. You don't think of a successful businessman in a pressed suit gently suggesting his wife is losing her mind. You don't think of a concerned husband telling your children you need help. But Dr. Walsh had been crystal clear. Psychological abuse is still abuse, Mrs. Torres. And in many ways, it's more insidious because it makes you complicit in your own destruction. It makes you doubt the very tool you need to escape, your own perception of reality. My phone buzzed. Victor. Hey, honey, just checking in. How was the client meeting? Drive safe. Love you. I stared at those words. Love you, and felt my stomach turn, because that's what made this so devastating. Part of me still wanted to believe he did love me. Part of me wanted to go home and tell him what Dr. Walsh said, and have him hold me and promise it wasn't true, that it was all a misunderstanding, that we could fix this together. But Dr. Walsh's warning echoed in my head. The moment he knows you've figured it out, he will escalate. Men like Victor don't let go of control easily. We need to move carefully and quickly. So I texted back. Meeting went great, stopping for groceries. Home soon. And then I did what Dr. Walsh had told me to do. I started documenting everything. She'd given me a list during our session, writing it out in her precise handwriting like a battle plan. Access any financial documents you can without alerting him. Make copies of everything. Check for hidden accounts. Look for large withdrawals or transfers. Document every incident of manipulation you can remember with dates and details. Record conversations if legal in your state, which it is. Save all text messages and emails, and most importantly, don't let him know anything has changed. You need to become the actor in your own life while we build your case. Sitting in that coffee shop, I opened my laptop and started with the finances. Victor had always handled our investments, our retirement accounts, the big picture money, while I managed my business and our household expenses. It was a division of labor that made sense, or so I'd thought. But now, looking at our joint accounts with fresh eyes, I saw the pattern Dr. Walsh had warned me about. Over the past 2 years since the gaslighting began, my name had been systematically removed from our secondary accounts, the investment portfolio, just Victor's name now, the rental property account, Victor's name, the emergency savings, Victor's name. I was still on our primary checking account, but that was it. Everything we'd built together over 26 years had been quietly, legally transferred into his sole control. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely type. This wasn't accidental. This wasn't just financial organization. This was a man preparing to take everything while making sure I'd have no legal claim to it. And if he'd succeeded in having me committed, if I hadn't found Dr. Walsh, I would have been powerless to stop it. I took screenshots of everything, sent them to a new email address I'd created just for this purpose. Then I dug deeper, checking our credit report, and that's when I found them. 3 credit cards I didn't know existed, all in Victor's name only, with significant balances. Where was that money going? What was he spending it on? Mrs. Torres, abusers often have hidden financial lives, Dr. Walsh had told me. Secret accounts, undisclosed debt, unexplained expenses. Financial abuse almost always accompanies psychological abuse. Control the money, control the person. By the time I drove home 3 hours later, I had a folder with 63 screenshots, a timeline of financial irregularities dating back 3 years, and a rage burning in my chest that felt cleaner and clearer than anything I'd felt in months. Victor was in the kitchen when I walked in, cooking dinner. He looked so normal, so domestic, the caring husband making pasta for his troubled wife. "There you are." He smiled, came over to kiss my cheek. "How was your day? You were gone a while." This was the test. Could I pretend? Could I act like I still believed his reality while building my escape? "It was good," I said, setting down my purse. "The Johnsons want to move forward with the full renovation. It's going to be a big project." "That's wonderful, honey." He studied my face. "You seem better, more like yourself." "I feel better," I lied, and watched something flicker across his face. Was it disappointment? Had he been expecting to come home to a confused, deteriorating wife? "Good. That's so good." He turned back to the stove. "I made your favorite, penne arrabbiata. Thought we could have a nice quiet dinner together." We ate. We talked about our days. I asked him about a client of his, and he asked about my renovation project, and to anyone watching we would have looked like a normal married couple having a normal Wednesday dinner. But I was recording the entire conversation on my phone in my pocket, and I caught him in 3 small lies, little things, testing me, seeing if I'd notice. The client meeting he said was on Thursday had actually been Monday, according to his calendar on the kitchen wall. The amount he said he'd paid for new tires for his car was $300 more than the receipt I'd seen last week. The name of Evan's girlfriend, which he got wrong even though he'd met her a dozen times. Small lies, constant lies. The kind of lies designed to make me second-guess every memory, every perception. But now I was counting them, documenting them, building my case. That night, after Victor fell asleep, I lay awake in the dark next to a man I no longer knew, if I ever had, and I thought about Dr. Walsh's question. How long do you think this has been happening? Because in my experience, this level of systematic manipulation doesn't develop overnight. How long had Victor been doing this? Had there been signs in our early years that I'd missed, red flags I'd dismissed as quirks or stress? I thought about his first wife, the one he never talked about, the marriage that ended after only 4 years. He'd always said she was unstable, that she'd left him suddenly, that it had been a relief when it was over. What if she hadn't been unstable? What if she'd been me 26 years ago? And she'd gotten out before it destroyed her? I needed to find her. I needed to know if Victor had done this before. The next morning, I called Dr. Walsh from my car outside a grocery store. I think I need to find his first wife, I said without preamble. I think he might have done this to her too. That's good instinct, Mrs. Torres. I could hear the approval in her voice. If there's a pattern of behavior, it strengthens your case significantly. But be careful. Don't do anything that might alert Victor that you're investigating him. How do I find her? I don't even know her last name now. She could have remarried. I have a colleague who works with domestic abuse cases who might be able to help. But Elena, she paused, and the use of my first name made me pay attention. I need you to prepare yourself for what you might find. If Victor did this to her, he likely did it successfully. She might not want to relive it. She might not believe you. Or she might have information that's very difficult to hear. I need to know, I said. I need to understand what I'm really dealing with. Dr. Walsh's colleague, an attorney named Lisa Mendez, who specialized in divorce cases involving abuse, found Victor's first wife in less than 48 hours. Her name was Patricia Caldwell now, remarried for 21 years, living 2 states away in Oregon. Lisa contacted her through a carefully worded letter explaining that her ex-husband's current wife was seeking information about the marriage, and to my shock, Patricia called me directly 3 days later. "Is this Elena Torres?" The voice on the phone was cautious, guarded. "Yes. Patricia, thank you so much for calling. I know this must be strange." "Strange," she laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Honey, I've been waiting 26 years for this call. I've been waiting for Victor's next wife to realize what he is and reach out. I'm just sorry it took this long." My breath caught. "So it's true. He did this to you too. Did he tell everyone you were crazy? Isolate you from your friends? Make you doubt your own memory until you couldn't tell what was real anymore? Try to take control of everything you owned?" Her voice was shaking now. "Did he start researching mental institutions and talking about how much he loved you while systematically destroying your sense of self?" "Yes." The word came out as a sob. "Yes, all of it. How did you get out?" "I ran." Patricia's voice went quiet. "I packed a bag one night while he was sleeping and I ran. Moved across the country, changed my phone number, never looked back. I had nothing, no money, no job, no proof of what he'd done, because who would believe me? He was so respected, so charming. I just ran and started over and spent the next 5 years in therapy trying to remember who I was before him." "Why didn't you tell anyone? Why didn't you report him? To who?" The bitterness in her voice was sharp. "The police? For what crime? Making me feel crazy. There were no laws against psychological abuse back then. No one even talked about gaslighting. I tried to tell his family, and they said I was just a bitter ex-wife trying to destroy a good man's reputation. I tried to warn mutual friends, and they stopped talking to me. Victor's a master at this, Elena. He's had decades to perfect it. By the time I left, he'd convinced everyone I knew that I was mentally unstable. The only power I had left was to disappear." I was crying now, sitting in my parked car outside the grocery store, talking to a woman who'd lived my nightmare a quarter century ago. "Did he ever remarry? Between you and me?" "No." Patricia was quiet for a moment. "I kept tabs on him for a few years, from a distance. He dated, but nothing serious. I think he needed time to rebuild his reputation after I left, make sure everyone forgot about the crazy first wife. By the time he married you, the story had probably evolved into something that made him look like a victim who'd bravely moved on. He told me you had a breakdown, that you left suddenly because you couldn't handle the relationship." "Of course he did," she sighed. "Elena, I need you to understand something. Victor doesn't do this because he's angry or because he loses control. He does it because he enjoys it. The control, the power, the way he can shape reality to suit himself. It's not about money, not really, though that's a nice bonus. It's about being the puppet master. And the scary part? I don't think he even sees it as wrong. I think in his mind he's just managing a situation, handling a problematic woman who needs his guidance. I'm not running, I said, surprising myself with the strength in my voice. I'm not disappearing. I'm going to fight him, and I'm going to win, and everyone is going to know what he is. Then you're braver than I was. Patricia's voice softened. What can I do to help? Would you be willing to testify in divorce court about what he did to you? The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. Then, I haven't seen that man in 26 years. I've spent 2.5 decades building a life where Victor Torres doesn't exist. You're asking me to blow that up, to face him again, to let him back into my world even for a day. I know what I'm asking. But Patricia, if he did this to you, and then to me, how many other women has he done this to? How many will there be after me if someone doesn't stop him? Another long silence. Then, send me the details. I'll think about it. But Elena, be careful. Be so careful. Because the most dangerous time with a man like Victor is when he realizes he's losing control. That's when the mask comes all the way off. That's when you see what's really underneath. We hung up, and I sat in my car shaking, because now I knew. This wasn't a troubled marriage. This wasn't miscommunication or stress or a husband who was just too controlling. This was a predator who'd done this before, who would do it again, who'd had 26 years to perfect his technique since Patricia escaped, and I'd just declared war on him. Over the next 2 weeks, Dr. Walsh and I worked systematically to build my case. She conducted a full psychological evaluation, cognitive tests, memory assessments, personality inventories, everything. When the results came back, she showed me page after page of data, proving what I already knew in my bones. I was completely mentally sound. No cognitive decline, no memory issues, no signs of any psychiatric disorder, just trauma responses consistent with ongoing psychological abuse. This evaluation is your shield, Dr. Walsh explained. When Victor inevitably claims you're unstable, we have objective evidence that you're not. But Elena, we need to move faster. I'm worried about how long you can maintain this pretense at home. She was right. Living with Victor while knowing what he was, playing the role of the confused wife while secretly documenting his abuse. It was destroying me in a different way. Every kind word from him felt like poison. Every gentle touch made my skin crawl. I was losing weight again. Not because I was crazy, but because I was living with my abuser while planning my escape. And Victor was noticing. You seem distant lately, he said one night over dinner. We were having the same conversation we always had. Surface level, pleasant, completely false. But his eyes were sharp, assessing. Are you feeling okay? Just tired. The renovation project is taking a lot of energy. Maybe you should take a break, cut back on clients for a while. He reached across the table to take my hand, and I had to force myself not to pull away. I worry about you working so hard, especially with everything else going on. There it was. Everything else. The implication that I was still fragile, still potentially unstable, still in need of his management. I'm fine, Victor. Really. Are you? He squeezed my hand. Because Evan called me today. He's worried too. He said you seemed off when he talked to you this week, distracted, not yourself. My blood went cold. You're talking to Evan about me? He's our son. He's concerned about his mother. We both are. Victor's face was the picture of loving worry, but I could see something else now. Something I'd been missing for 2 years. There was calculation behind his eyes. He was measuring my response, adjusting his approach, fine-tuning his control. What exactly are you telling him? I kept my voice level, curious rather than accusatory. The truth, that I'm worried about you, that you've been struggling, that I think you need more help than you're getting. He paused. I told him about the psychiatrist I found for you, Dr. Walsh. I told him you've been resistant to getting help, and that has me concerned. I felt the trap closing. Victor thought I'd been seeing his chosen psychiatrist. The one he'd selected, the one who would almost certainly support his narrative that I needed intensive treatment. He had no idea I'd gone to a different Dr. Walsh, one who specialized in exposing men exactly like him. "I've been thinking about that," I said carefully. "Maybe you're right. Maybe I should talk to someone." His face lit up, actual genuine pleasure, because he thought he was winning. "Really? Elena, that's wonderful. I'm so proud of you for taking this step. I'll call Dr. Walsh's office tomorrow and make you an appointment." "Actually," I said, and this was dangerous, but I needed to know his full plan. "What if I need more than just therapy? You mentioned facilities before. What did you mean?" Victor's expression shifted to something that might have been tender concern, but read to me now as predatory satisfaction. "There are excellent residential treatment centers, places where you could get intensive help, away from the stress of daily life, just for a little while, until you're feeling stronger. You've researched them?" "Of course I have, because I love you, because I want you to get better." He squeezed my hand again. "Elena, I need you to know, if it comes to that, if you need that level of care, I'll support you completely, financially, emotionally, whatever you need. Our children understand. They're on board. We all just want you to be well." There it was, the full plan. Get me committed to a facility, isolated from everyone, under his financial control, while he managed the narrative to our children and our community. It was elegant, really, thorough. If I hadn't stumbled onto Dr. Walsh, if I hadn't figured it out in time, I would be there right now, locked in a psychiatric facility, my business gone, my assets transferred, my reality completely controlled by a man who'd convinced everyone, including me, that he was just trying to help his sick wife. "Thank you," I whispered, because I couldn't trust my voice to say more. That night, I moved into the guest room. I told Victor I'd been having insomnia and didn't want to keep him awake. He accepted it with his usual expression of understanding concern, but I saw the flash of irritation before he covered it. I was deviating from the script. The confused, deteriorating wife was supposed to be clinging to him, not pulling away. I called Dr. Walsh from the locked guest room at 2 a.m. "He's been planning this for at least 2 years, I told her. Everything. The financial transfers, isolating me from friends, turning my children against me, researching commitment procedures. It's all been building to this. Dr. Walsh, how long do I have? How much longer can I pretend before he forces the issue?" "Not long," she said grimly. "Elena, we need to accelerate the timeline. I'm going to connect you with Lisa Mendez immediately. Tomorrow, we need to file for divorce before Victor makes his move." "But we don't have everything yet. The hidden credit cards, Patricia's testimony. We have enough. We have my evaluation proving your mental competence. We have your documentation of his manipulation. We have a pattern of financial control. We have your testimony and Patricia's willingness to support it. Elena, the danger you're in has just escalated. If Victor senses you're pulling away, he will act. We need to act first." My hands were shaking. If I file for divorce, he'll know. He'll know I figured it out. "Yes, which is why you can't be in that house when he finds out. Can you stay somewhere safe? Parents? Friends? A hotel? My friends all think I'm crazy. My children think I need help. My parents are dead. I have nowhere to go." "Then you'll stay with me," Dr. Walsh said firmly. "I have a guest room. You'll pack a bag tomorrow while Victor is at work, essential documents and belongings only, and you'll come straight to my house. Then we'll serve him with divorce papers and a temporary restraining order at his office. We'll control the narrative before he can." A restraining order? But he's never been violent. Psychological abuse is abuse, Elena, and men like Victor, when they lose control, can become unpredictable. We're not taking chances. I packed the next morning with shaking hands, important documents, birth certificates, passports, my business records, my laptop, my journal, clothes, my mother's jewelry. I moved through my own house like a thief, taking pieces of my life, leaving behind 26 years of history, and I found something. In Victor's study, looking for our tax returns, I found a folder, a physical folder, tucked in the back of his locked filing cabinet. I'd found the key in his desk months ago during the early days of my secret investigation. Inside were medical records. My medical records. Pages and pages of notes from our family doctor, Dr. Harrison, detailing concerns about my cognitive decline, my paranoid ideation, my resistance to treatment. There were records of prescriptions written for anxiety medications I'd never taken, because I'd never known they were prescribed. There were notes about phone calls from Victor expressing concern about my deteriorating condition. All of it painting a picture of a severely mentally ill woman who was refusing help. All of it lies. All of it carefully documented over 2 years to support an involuntary commitment case. And at the bottom of the folder, a business card. Meadowbrook Psychiatric Residential Facility. On the back, in Victor's handwriting, room available, deposit paid. He'd already paid a deposit to have me committed. I took photos of everything, then carefully put it all back exactly as I'd found it. Then I walked out of my house for what I thought might be the last time, got in my car, and drove to Dr. Walsh's office, where Lisa Mendez was waiting. "Mrs. Torres," Lisa said, standing to shake my hand. She was sharp-eyed and efficient, with the air of someone who'd seen too much, but refused to be broken by it. "Dr. Walsh has briefed me on your situation. I've been practicing family law for 20 years, and I want you to know what your husband has done to you is among the most calculating cases of coercive control I've seen. But we're going to stop him. We're going to expose him, and we're going to make sure he never does this to anyone else again." "How?" I asked. "He's convinced everyone. My children, my friends, our doctor. Everyone believes his version of reality. How do we fight that?" Lisa smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant smile. "We use his own weapons against him. Every lie he told will document and prove it false. Every manipulation will expose. Every piece of his carefully constructed narrative will dismantle in open court. And Mrs. Torres, the beautiful thing about family court, everything is public record. Every piece of testimony, every piece of evidence, every single thing Dr. Walsh will say about what your husband is. It will all be available for anyone to read. Your children, your friends, your community. Everyone who believed him will have access to the truth." "I want my children there," I said suddenly. "When this comes out in court, I want Evan and Sophia to be there to hear it. They need to see who their father really is." Dr. Walsh and Lisa exchanged a glance. "That's risky," Dr. Walsh said gently. "If they still believe Victor's narrative, seeing you challenge him in court might just reinforce his story that you're paranoid or vindictive." "Or," Lisa countered, hearing expert testimony about their father's abuse, seeing the documented evidence, watching him crumble under cross-examination, it might be exactly what they need to see through his lies. "It's my choice," I said, "and I choose to fight this in the light, in front of everyone. No more secrets, no more manipulation in the dark." We filed for divorce that afternoon. Full dissolution of marriage, division of assets, and a temporary restraining order requiring Victor to stay at least 500 feet away from me pending the hearing. Lisa had the papers served to Victor at his office at 4:47 p.m. on a Friday afternoon. I was sitting in Dr. Walsh's living room when my phone started ringing. Victor. I didn't answer. Evan. I didn't answer. Sophia. I didn't answer. 12 calls in 15 minutes. Then the text started. Victor. "Elena, what is this? Call me immediately." Victor. "This is insane. You're proving everything I've been worried about." Victor. "I'm trying to help you and you're doing this to me, to our family?" Evan. "Mom, Dad is devastated. He says you filed for divorce and gotten a restraining order. What is going on?" Sophia. "Mom, please call me. Dad is really upset. He says you're having some kind of episode. We need to talk about getting you help." I turned off my phone and looked at Dr. Walsh. "Here's what you need to understand," she said quietly. "Right now, Victor is scrambling. For the first time in 2 years, he's not in control of the narrative. He didn't see this coming, and he's going to do everything in his power to regain control. He'll call everyone you know. He'll tell them you've had a complete breakdown. He'll play the victim. He'll be convincing, because that's what he does. The next few days are going to be brutal. I know. Do you? She leaned forward. Because, Elena, some of the people you love are going to believe him. Maybe all of them at first. You're going to feel more isolated than you've ever felt. You're going to doubt yourself. You're going to wonder if going back and accepting his version of reality would be easier than fighting this battle. And that's when you need to remember, you are not crazy. You have the truth. And the truth eventually always wins. That night, lying in Dr. Walsh's guest room, I thought about Patricia running in the middle of the night with nothing but a suitcase and hope. I thought about how close I'd come to being committed to Meadowbrook Psychiatric Facility, drugged and helpless while Victor took everything. I thought about my children, believing their father, looking at me like I was the enemy. And I thought about the question Dr. Walsh had asked in our first session, the one that had haunted me ever since. How did he choose you? Because men like Victor don't pick victims randomly. They look for specific qualities, usually strength, success, independence, qualities they want to break. Why had Victor chosen me? What had he seen in the vibrant, successful 48-year-old woman I'd been 2 years ago that made him think I'd be easy to destroy? And the darker question, the one that kept me awake, what would he do now that I'd escaped? Because Patricia was right. The most dangerous time with a man like Victor is when he realizes he's losing control. And I'd just declared war. If someone can spend 2 years carefully, methodically convincing everyone you knew that you were mentally unstable, if they can isolated you from every support system, controlled every resource, position themselves as the devoted caretaker of their sick spouse, why wouldn't you fight back? Because here's the terrifying truth about psychological abuse. It doesn't leave scars anyone can photograph. It doesn't create police reports or hospital records. It exists in the gap between his version of reality and yours. And when everyone believes him, your truth becomes nothing more than evidence of your instability. The divorce hearing was in 3 weeks. 3 weeks for Victor to rebuild his narrative, to convince Evan and Sophia I'd finally snapped, to turn my community against me completely. 3 weeks to prepare for the fight of my life. And in those 3 weeks, Dr. Frau, Walsh and Lisa Mendez were going to help me do something I'd never imagined I'd have to do. Prove that I was sane enough to leave my husband. Make sure you're subscribed. Because what happened when we walked into that courtroom, when Dr. Walsh took the stand and started systematically dismantling Victor's carefully constructed lies, when Patricia showed up to testify about history repeating itself, that's when Victor's true face finally showed itself. And trust me, some masks once removed reveal monsters. The real diagnosis was about to be delivered. And it wasn't mine. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. After 3 weeks of preparation, 3 weeks of Victor telling anyone who would listen that I'd had a complete mental breakdown, 3 weeks of my children refusing to speak to me because their father had convinced them I was beyond reason, I walked into that courtroom on a Tuesday morning in May and realized that my entire life, my sanity, my future, would be decided in a room that felt more like a large office than the grand hall of justice I'd imagined. But here's what I didn't expect. Evan and Sophia were sitting in the gallery. They weren't sitting on my side. There was no my side, really. Just rows of wooden benches. But they were there. And when I walked in with Lisa Mendez and Dr. Walsh, Sophia's eyes met mine for just a second before she looked away. I couldn't read her expression. Anger? Confusion? Doubt? I didn't know anymore. Victor had spent 3 weeks telling them I'd betrayed the family, that the restraining order was proof of my paranoia, that filing for divorce was the final evidence that I needed serious psychiatric intervention. For all I knew, they were here to support him, to testify against me, to watch their mother finally get the help everyone thought she needed. Victor sat at the opposite table with his attorney, a polished man in an expensive suit who looked like he could sell ice to penguins. Victor looked devastated, and I mean genuinely devastated. Hollow-eyed, like he hadn't slept. His suit was impeccable as always, but there was something in his posture, a slight slump to his shoulders that screamed, "Wounded husband," just trying to understand why his sick wife was doing this to him. It was a masterful performance, and I felt that old familiar doubt try to creep back in. Was I doing the right thing? Was I destroying a man who'd only ever tried to help me? Then I caught the way his eyes flicked to Evan and Sophia, assessing their reaction to his performance, and I remembered. This was what he did. This was his art, and I was done being his canvas. Judge Catherine Morrison entered, and we all stood. She was in her early 60s with steel gray hair and eyes that suggested she'd heard every lie and seen every manipulation the family court system had to offer. Lisa had told me Judge Morrison was fair but tough, that she didn't tolerate games, and that she had a particular intolerance for abusers who used the system as a weapon. "I'm going to let you in on something I learned," Lisa had said during our preparation. "Judges see a lot of he said, she said in divorce cases. A lot of ugly custody battles and bitter splits. But when you bring in a clinical expert like Dr. Walsh with documented evidence of systematic psychological abuse, that changes everything. That's not opinion. That's diagnosis. That's pattern. That's proof." The hearing began with Victor's attorney painting a picture of a devoted husband watching his wife deteriorate, a successful woman struck by sudden cognitive decline and paranoid delusions, a man who'd tried everything to help her until she'd suddenly, inexplicably, turned against him with false accusations and a vindictive divorce filing. "My client has done nothing but love and support his wife through an incredibly difficult time," Victor's attorney said, his voice dripping with sympathetic concern. "And now he finds himself here, accused of abuse, when the real crisis is Mrs. Torres's refusal to accept the help she so desperately needs." Then it was our turn, and Lisa Mendez stood up with the quiet confidence of someone holding a royal flush. "Your Honor, over the next hour we will present evidence that Mr. Torres has engaged in a systematic, calculated campaign of psychological abuse against his wife over the past 2 years. We will show that he has deliberately isolated her from friends and family, that he has undermined her perception of reality through a technique known as gaslighting, that he has taken control of marital assets while removing her access, and that he was in the process of attempting to have her involuntarily committed to a psychiatric facility to complete his control over her life and finances. We have documentation, we have expert testimony, and we have evidence that Mr. Torres has done this before to his first wife 26 years ago." I watched Victor's face. For just a fraction of a second, his mask slipped, his jaw tightened, his eyes went cold. Then the concerned husband expression was back, but I'd seen it. The real Victor. And I knew our children had seen it too, because Sophia had leaned forward, her eyes sharp now, watching her father like she was seeing him for the first time. Dr. Walsh took the stand, and I watched 3 weeks of preparation transform into a clinical dissection of Victor's abuse. She walked Judge Morrison through every tactic: the isolation, the reality distortion, the financial control, the weaponizing of family relationships. She presented my psychological evaluation, page after documented page, proving that I had no cognitive issues, no mental illness, nothing but trauma responses consistent with ongoing psychological abuse. Mrs. Torres is not now, nor has she ever been, mentally unstable, Dr. Walsh said clearly. What she has experienced is a textbook case of coercive control. Mr. Torres has engaged in a deliberate pattern of behavior designed to undermine his wife's perception of reality, isolate her from support systems, and position himself to take complete control of her life and assets. This is not a case of a concerned husband trying to help his sick wife. This is a case of psychological abuse that was escalating toward a potentially devastating conclusion. "And what conclusion was that, Dr. Walsh?" Lisa asked. "Based on evidence Mrs. Torres discovered, including a paid deposit at a psychiatric residential facility, I believe Mr. Torres was preparing to have his wife involuntarily committed. Once committed, she would have been isolated, medicated, and completely under his control, with no ability to contest his management of their assets or his narrative about her mental state. In my professional opinion, Mrs. Torres's decision to leave when she did may have saved her from a scenario where escape would have been nearly impossible. I heard Sophia gasp. Soft, but I heard it. Evan was staring at his father, and Victor was shaking his head, that expression of hurt disbelief on his face. But it wasn't working anymore. The evidence was too clear, the pattern too obvious. Then Patricia took the stand, and I watched my husband's second wife tell the court about being his first victim. She was shaking, visibly terrified, but her voice was steady as she described the same tactics, the same escalation, the same systematic destruction of her reality 26 years ago. I ran because I didn't know what else to do, Patricia said. I had no proof. No one believed me. I spent years thinking maybe he was right. Maybe I was crazy, until I finally accepted that the only way to survive was to disappear. When Elena contacted me and told me her story, I knew immediately. He was doing it again. And I knew that if I didn't testify, if I didn't come forward, he'd keep doing it. To the next woman, and the next. So I'm here, even though I'm terrified, because this has to stop. Victor's attorney tried to discredit her. Bitter ex-wife, no proof, decades-old allegations, but the parallel was too exact. Two women, 26 years apart, describing identical patterns of abuse from the same man. Judge Morrison's expression had gone from neutral to something harder. Then came the financial evidence. Lisa walked the judge through every account I'd been removed from, every hidden credit card, every unexplained withdrawal. She presented the folder Victor had kept in his locked filing cabinet. The fake medical records, the paid deposit at the psychiatric facility, the careful documentation building a case for my commitment. This is not the behavior of a concerned spouse, Lisa said. This is the behavior of someone executing a plan to isolate, control, and ultimately institutionalize his wife while taking complete control of assets worth over $2 million. I looked at Evan and Sophia. They were both crying now, silent tears running down their faces as they watched their father's carefully constructed reality collapse. Sophia's hand was gripping Evan's arm so tightly her knuckles were white. When it was Victor's turn to testify, I saw something I'd never seen before. I saw him fail. Under Lisa's cross-examination, his stories started to contradict. The dates didn't line up. The explanations didn't make sense, and when he tried to turn on that charm, that concerned husband persona, Judge Morrison shut him down with a look that could cut glass. "Mr. Torres," she said coldly, "I've been on this bench for 17 years. I know manipulation when I see it. Answer the attorney's questions directly, or I will hold you in contempt." It took 3 hours. 3 hours to dismantle 26 years of marriage and 2 years of systematic abuse. When it was over, Judge Morrison didn't even take a recess to deliberate. "I'm issuing my ruling from the bench," she said, and her voice was ice. "Mr. Torres, what you have done to your wife constitutes domestic abuse of the most insidious kind. You have deliberately, calculatedly, and systematically worked to destroy her mental health, her relationships, and her autonomy. The evidence presented here today is among the most clear-cut cases of coercive control I have seen in my career. She awarded me full marital assets, every account, every investment, the house, everything. She extended the restraining order for 5 years. She ordered Victor to undergo mandatory psychological evaluation and treatment, though she noted for the record that men with his diagnosis rarely respond to treatment. And she made her ruling part of public record, which meant that anyone, employers, friends, future partners, could access the court documents detailing exactly what Victor Torres had done to his wife. "And Mr. Torres," Judge Morrison said as we were preparing to leave, "let me be very clear. If you violate this restraining order, if you contact your wife directly or indirectly, if you make any attempt to undermine the terms of this judgment, I will use every power this court has to hold you accountable. You have abused the trust of your marriage and weaponized the mental health system against a vulnerable person. That ends today." Victor walked out of that courtroom a different man than he'd walked in, or rather the same man, but with the mask finally, permanently removed. His reputation, the thing he'd valued above everything else, was destroyed. Within 24 hours, the local news had picked up the story. Within a week, his business had lost 3 major clients. Within a month, he'd resigned from the board of 2 nonprofit organizations and moved to a different state. But the real moment of healing came in the courthouse hallway, after the hearing was over. Sophia ran to me, actually ran, throwing her arms around me and sobbing into my shoulder. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry we didn't believe you. I'm so sorry we let him." "Shh." I held her tight, crying myself now. "It's not your fault. None of this is your fault. He manipulated all of us." Evan stood back a little, his face twisted with guilt and anger. How do we even begin to make this right? How do we apologize for not seeing what he was doing? I reached out and pulled him into the hug. "You were manipulated by a master manipulator. You start by understanding it wasn't your fault, and then we all heal together, as a family. The family he tried to destroy." That was 8 months ago. Today I'm sitting in my home office. The house is mine now, filled with new furniture, new colors, new life. Torres Interiors is thriving again. I've reconnected with old friends, made new ones, built a support system that Victor never could have penetrated. I speak at domestic abuse awareness events twice a month, always focusing on psychological abuse in older women, the silent epidemic nobody wants to acknowledge. Evan and Sophia and I have family dinners every Sunday. We're in therapy together, working through the trauma, learning to recognize manipulation, to trust our own perceptions again. They've both broken off contact with their father, their choice, not mine. I never asked them to choose sides. They chose truth over manipulation. They chose healing over enabling. As for Victor, last I heard he'd remarried. A woman named Jennifer, bright and successful and independent. She filed for separation after 8 months, citing emotional abuse. I sent her Dr. Walsh's contact information through her attorney. I hope she uses it. I hope she gets out faster than I did, faster than Patricia did, because that's what this story is really about. Not revenge, though the courtroom victory felt pretty sweet. Not even justice, though watching Judge Morrison dismantle Victor's lies was satisfying beyond words. It's about breaking the cycle. It's about speaking truth so loudly that the next victim knows she's not crazy, she's not alone, and there is a way out. I'm Elena Torres. I'm 50 years old, and I spent 2 years believing I was losing my mind before a 45-minute conversation changed my life. If my story sounds familiar to you, if you're reading this and thinking about your own relationship, about times you've doubted your own memory or been told you're too sensitive or had friends mysteriously pull away after your partner spoke to them, please hear me. You're not crazy. You're not imagining it, and there are people who will believe you. Now here's what I need you to do, and this is important. In the comments below, I want you to write one thing, the name of someone in your life who would believe you, no matter what. Just one person who you know would stand by you if you told them you were in trouble. Write their name, or just write, "I have someone," if you want privacy. Because the first step to breaking free is knowing you're not alone. Now write that comment, hit that subscribe button, and remember, the only person who decides your reality is you. Thank you for listening to my story.